Good morning, my name is Administrator for today's board meeting, Thursday, February 1st, 2024. If you're logged into Teams in person, please mute your laptops to prevent feedback and echo. This meeting is being recorded. Madam Chair Stevens, we're ready to begin.
Okay, thank you so much, Holly. Appreciate it. I'm coming to you live from Washington, D.C. at the National Academies of Science. I'm here working on an ACRP project and couldn't quite make it back in time for the board meeting. So I'm glad we have this virtual option. And I think we will go ahead and go to the call to order and roll call. Holly.
All right, Sarah Lucas, present. Bill Grupp,
Here.
Catherine Stevens,
Here.
Jeff Pritchard. See him logged in and he's not in yet, so he might be a little late. Steve Nagy
Here.
and Jim Knight.
Here.
Complete. And we are at quorum.
Okay, thank you so much. And looks like we're going to do the approval of the consent agenda. And so this is for the approval of the December 7th, 2023 board meeting minutes. And I just need a motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 7th, 2023, the board meeting as presented or as amended. And if there are any changes, you can note those as well.
I move to approve the December 7, 2023 minutes as presented.
Let's go. I'll second.
All right, thank you. It's moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. And then Holly, I think I need a clarification. I see the slate up that says no public comment taken at this time, but I have that on my chair agenda.
Oh, okay, that's incorrect then. We are taking public comment.
Okay, great. And do we have anyone signed up for public comment at this time?
Does not look like we have anybody signed up for public comments in the room.
Okay, and anybody online for public comment? I'm not seeing any.
If anybody online would like to speak for public comment, just make a raise your hand or speak in the chat. Waiting a little bit. I don't see anybody online.
Okay, yeah, I'm not seeing anybody either. Okay, well, we will move right along to welcome to PDX and Steve Nagy.
Yay. Thank you, Catherine. Wish you were here. I hope you enjoy your time in DC. Thanks everybody who is here and attending the board meeting for making it here in person. Welcome to the Port of Portland for those of you who have or haven't been here. We're coming from our Port of Portland headquarters, which we constructed and moved into in 2010. So we've been in here almost 14 years now. So for those who are familiar, or for those of you who aren't familiar, the Port of Portland it's a special district in the state. We were created by the Oregon legislature with the original charge to dredge the Columbia River from the mouth of the Columbia to the Portland Harbor. That was our original charter. It's since expanded. In the 1970s, the port integrated with the city of Portland's Portland Commission on Docks, which actually operated a lot of the riverfront in the Portland metro area along the Willamette River. So became one agency. So currently today, the port operates 3 airports, PDX, which you're sitting at here, and our 2 general aviation airports. Three airports, 4 marine terminals along the Willamette and Columbia, and 5 business parks, industrial parks that we operate and own as well. We have a commission that is appointed by the governor. All members of our commission, they're representative of both the metro area as well as throughout the state of Oregon. We have representatives from Southern Oregon across the Cascades on our board as well, and then from each of our 3 county area here. Being the special, and we have an executive director who's hired by the Port Commission to be our chief executive. The ports is a special taxing district of the state. We do it covers the 3 county area here in the metro area. But just a little bit about how we operate. On the aviation side of the port, we have basically a firewall between the 2 different sides of our organization from a financial and perspective. And so on the aviation side, we are an organization that is completely 100% dependent upon the businesses and the revenues with whom the revenues of the business with whom we partner and with whom we work with. So we are a public agency, but we very much operate like a private company, looking at the cost benefit of each of and the business case associated with each business transaction. On the marine side, there is a small portion that people pay in their property taxes in the Portland metro area, in the 3 county area, and that makes up about 3% of the revenue on our marine and industrial side. So the other 97% again is made up, or 90+% is made up of operating revenue that we get from working with our businesses who are our partners. So though we are a public agency, we run very much like a much more private organization based on not so much turning a profit, but certainly being able to make sure that we cover the cost of our operations. Here at PDX, like Catherine and many of our other commercial service airports, we have a master agreement with our airlines that's structured as to how we pay for our improvements here, whether some of them come from the revenues on airport activities compared to the revenues that we generate from our airlines. And so our agreement, like many other airports, sets up how we are able to divvy up and spend that money on our specific projects. It's what that's just a little bit of background of who we are. We've set up an afternoon tour here. We are, and I'll talk more about it at that time. We are in the middle. Well, we're more than in the middle. We're approaching the end of by the time it's completed, it will be about an 8-year major capital improvement campaign here, about a $3 billion suite of projects that started in 2017, 2018, and will finish in the end of 2025 with the completion of our terminal core. And I'll talk more about that and before we go on the tour. And depending on how much time we have, we can maybe actually even see some of the improvements that we've already completed along the way. And talk about those, and then get a tour of what's about to open in May, which is the first phase of our terminal expansion, and our ticket lobby, our new ticket lobby, our new security checkpoints, and concessions that will be used to support PDX for the next 20+ years as we grow from our current about 19 million in-plane passengers. Our capacity will take us all the way through about 35 million enplanements. So we're very excited about our increase in facilities that are about to be commissioned. So welcome everybody. Just a little bit for everybody in the room. I'll cover. Feel free to, the restrooms. I think maybe we talked about this before we got online, but they are, if you go down to the left and another right there in the hall there. There's also a kitchen there if you need water or coffee or any of those other things as well. I think we also have it here. But yeah, feel free, and our front desk, our reception, can certainly answer any other questions, and make sure that everybody gets their parking validated before they leave as well. So yeah, welcome. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Steve. I got the sneak peek last week. Your team was so gracious to have the Eugene team up to pretty early in your construction process, so we could see some of those really big beams being moved in. And then I got a little sneak peek last week to see the progress, and it's looking amazing. It's going to be an amazing facility when you guys have got it all operational. So looking forward to that.
And many of almost all of the major mass timber structure that are in the beams were constructed in Eugene.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Well, thanks so much for that introduction, Steve. And wish I could be there with the group for the tour, but like I said, I got the sneak peek last week. So we will move on to the Connect to Oregon grant application review, and that's with John.
Morning, John.
Morning. Let me get this rolling here. So I'm John Boren with ODOT and working with the grant selection process for Connect Oregon. So I'm going to provide this group with a bit of overview of the upcoming competitive program, as well as talk about your role, because the State Aviation Board does have a pretty critical piece to play in this process. Just a level set here, Connect Oregon's been around since 2005. It's been focused on non-highway modes of transportation, meaning projects that are not eligible for the state gas tax. We've had 7 competitive cycles. In that time, nearly $500 million awarded, over 200 projects. We just did have a recent cycle that ran from late 21 into May of 22. We had 46 million available that was awarded, and that was against 130 million requests, so about a 2.5 to 1 ratio of being oversubscribed. And this is a bit of a unique program because it blends multiple different modes of transportation in one. Other states, if they have something, it tends to be much more focused, small airports, short line railroads, that kind of thing, not at all blended together. And another aspect of it is the color of money that comes in. It is all from the privilege tax on new vehicles. There's no federal funding that comes directly into it, although it is common for grant recipients to leverage a Connect to Oregon award against other federal funding opportunities. So a quick snapshot of the previous cycle, Connect Oregon 8, projects selected in May. And they're all pretty much on track. We've got a handful that are finished or about to be finished. Most will finish this summer, with the last stragglers probably being the summer of 2025. So this next upcoming cycle that we're looking at right now is the program has changed over time. There were other modes that have moved in and out, but as it sits now, and it did for Connect 8, it's rail, marine, or aviation capital improvement projects. So projects with a long lifespan, not operational daily maintenance type costs. And the rubric by which projects are selected are how they show economic benefits to the state, lower transportation costs. We'll get into that a little bit more later. We have about a similar amount available funding this cycle, about 46 million, and applications are currently open right now, and they will close February 29th here at the end of the month. So we will hopefully start seeing them trickle in here soon. So for our review process, as far as grant programs go, it's on the complicated side. There's a lot of daylight, a lot of ways for people to interact with it. We receive grants, applications in. That'll happen in the end of February. The modal staff, so state staff will review the applications, make sure that they are actually eligible for the program, no key elements are missing. Then it will go to the various subject matter discipline groups. So State Department of Aviation staff will review and score applications based on how well they meet the statutory considerations. And then the next big step will be, it'll go to the regional solutions teams, the modal committees, meaning in this case, the State Aviation Board will serve as the modal committee that will provide rankings for all aviation related projects. And then the area commissions on transportation. I know there might be some overlap here, but the very ODOT divides the state into 5 different regions, and of that, there's area commissions on transportation, usually made up of local elected officials, and they'll rank projects within their own geographic boundaries. Now, all this will come together into our final review committee, and they'll do the last pass on what they recommend to be funded. That will go on to our State Transportation Commission. They're the ones with the final say on what projects get selected, but they rely pretty heavily on the extensive work that happens in those committee phases. And as it sits right now, we're looking at a October meet. The OTC is a regular meeting in October that they would gavel down and hopefully be awarding some projects. So how each committee decides to rank projects, there's a little bit of bit of flexibility there depending on number of projects and how they tend to work. You can receive presentations and have Q&A with applicants. We would ask that equal opportunity and time be provided for all. So it's a little easier if there's only a handful, you can really get into depth. But if it's not, if there's quite a few, then you might have to limit applicants to just a few minutes. Whether or not an applicant chooses to provide a presentation shouldn't be held against them, but it's just really an opportunity to better understand the materials better. And some of these applicants have a business environment that's evolving, so certain conditions can change. Now, I mentioned the staff scoring. The staff scoring it's not required in statute, but other committees have found it's helpful as a starting point to understand at first pass. This is how staff reviewed them, and to provide that first cut. The outcome of this group is to provide a ranking, as in, if you were to draft these projects, what order would you fund them in? What is, like, if we're only going to fund one, it's this one, then this one, all the way down to the bottom. And they need to be looked at through the prism of how do they advance statutory considerations. There's a lot of ways to slice the pie or spread the peanut butter, or whatever metaphor you want to use, but it's how does this benefit the state as far as transportation and economics? And I'll touch on these here. So the statutory decision considerations, these are them kind of boiled down a little bit into bullets. How do they improve access to jobs and labor, economic benefits to the state? Is it a critical link for the system? One that's come up a bit is how ready for construction is the project? Is it, is it well thought out? Is it kind of an aspirational design on the back of a napkin? And these are all kind of a number of factors that come to play when choosing to rank a project. The certainty of their match. There's a 30% match required for awards. We do have additional considerations, and this coming from the ODOT Strategic Action Plan, plan for the next few years, about points of emphasis for the department. And so we have optional responses that applicants can provide for equity or climate change, greenhouse gas emission reduction impacts. And those are really meant for if there are projects that are very closely, in score, really hard to say which one's better than the other. And that might be a score that or that the review groups could choose to move one up over the other. So each project should be weighed on its own merits and benefits. We shouldn't be looking at trying to package groups of projects in certain areas. We do know that the committee members, within the board here, they have a perspective from a different part of the state, from a different type of airport, from a different business line. And we really do look for you to bring that knowledge of how, when you're looking at the application, like, oh, this is how this would fit into the broader system or benefit the state. This is a bit of a unique program, is in there aren't really any in statute or any rule constraints as far as minimum maximum size of project, minimum maximum dollar amount for any given mode or region. So we have had projects as small as 100,000 to as large as 13 million. Although I would note a typical award amount is in the 1 to 1.5 million. So each board committee will receive their list of projects and the application materials, and the outcome of their meeting is a ranking. And I'm just showing one for what it looks like when we have the regions do this. It would be very similar for aviation. And one of the areas of concern is, or understanding is that statutory consideration score is really a starting point. It's not a be all end all, and you're not constrained to that. You can see on, in this instance, this is our region 4. So think of like the US 97 corridor based from the state line, California-Washington state lines, that that Bend Air Traffic Control Tower was rated highly by staff, highest of these projects, and then the region agreed. However, that wasn't always the case where we had a project, the Klamath Northern Railway track replacement had a bit of a lower score by staff, but that region determined that, you know what, they really thought it should be their third priority. So the same principle holds true um, with the modes, where we expect there to be some overlap, but by no means is this group beholden to what Department of Aviation staff come up with. It's just intended to be a starting point to kind of, take up some of that initial work. So once we get all those rankings from each of the modes and regions, we'll have what's called our final review committee, and there'll be 9 voting members, 5 from the ODOT regions and 4 from the modal committees. In this case, aviation, marine, rail, and freight. Typically, it's the chair of the chair or vice chair of that committee that serves, or who's ever available. I know everyone's pretty busy. Where it gets a little tricky and a little mathy, and I won't get into this too much, but we got to blend these rankings together, but we're not comparing apples and apples to begin with, because a project that's ranked 4th out of 12, it's not the same as 4th out of 8. It's actually higher. It's in the top third rather than just being in the top half. So we go through a statistical process called normalization, and then the final review committee takes all that inputs. They have a starting list, and they just focus on projects near the cut line, with the goal being to, those edge cases. Should we fund this? Should we not? Not to rehash any top or bottom projects. So what this looks like, a lot going on here, but I'll focus on okay, here's one. The third project, that City of Eugene Airport widening. So you can see how that got blended together. Its ODOT region had it as its #1 priority. Our Freight Advisory Committee had it a little bit lower at 7th out of, again, they had 33, but the Aviation group had it as their second. So once that it was all composited together, it was the third highest ranked project. So it was pretty safely in that grouping that was to be funded. And one of the discussion points from our last cycle was, how do we focus the final review committee on those edge case projects, and not feel like they have to kind of re-explore all 50 or however many there are. So what we're proposing for this cycle is that the highest ranking projects, totaling 2/3 of available funds at the start, they're set. They're not going to be considered for removal. There's broad consensus that they are strong or have high likelihood of success. Let's not mess with that. So and then the next is, we don't want to reconsider projects that scored very low or near the bottom, where there's a consensus that there was a lot of risk, or perhaps more needed to be done on these, so that only the projects just below the cut line, so totaling 1/3 of available funds, could be moved up. And just to really put a final point on this, the final review committee is intended to put the final touches on the work that's already been done. So really the major lifting will be done when your group meets here in a few months to go through each project and not to put everything back on the table. So 2/3, 1/3, what this would look like in practice if we had applied this last time, it would have been projects 1 through 14 would have been quote unquote safe. They would have been off the table for consideration by our final review committee. And then projects 29 and below, they're beyond that 1/3 of available funding because it's about 15-16 million. So our final review committee, instead of needing to bone up on 50 projects, it would be about 14 that they could look at. Do we have the right mix? Is there anything, any other circumstance that we really need to think about as far as moving projects above or below that cut line? And that cut line is, in this case here, is under project 21. So I've blasted through quite a bit of information, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the group and talk a little bit about what the next steps are.
Great, thank you so much, Sean. I know I have a couple of questions for you, maybe the group does. So if you've got questions, please use your raise your hand function. So my questions are, do you find that the 30% match has been a barrier for some organizations in applying? Because it's especially in aviation, that's a lot larger match than, say, our airport improvement program grant funding.
Yeah. Well, oddly enough, aviation has been of the modes best able to, at least historically, leverage FAA grants. They don't quite exist the same way in others. Yeah, I would say that it seems like almost the majority of aviation grants do have some sort of other match brought in, and they cross match each other. That's beneficial as far as lowering the amount of out-of-pocket costs, but then you have two programs you got to meet. But no, we definitely hear that's a factor as far as limiting what different groups can go for.
And then for this last round of projects, have you seen impacts from the spike in construction costs? And I know that was an issue for us, and we wound up pushing our project by a year.
Yes, that absolutely came up in all construction. Inflation in general came up across the board, and so that comes for applicants, if there's any in the room, that to not say estimate high, but just be very thoughtful about those numbers you come up with, to not oversell what you can do with a certain amount of money, because what you apply for is what you would get awarded, and we can't top it off, even if it's $20,000, some nominal amount. We can't add that back in. So yeah, definitely be mindful of that.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I suspected that was the case.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions for John, either in the room? Holly, you're going to have to help me out, I think, if you've got any questions in the room.
Anybody in the room or online? If anybody online has a question, you can always use the raise hand function or send a chat. Chair Stevens, just for the record, board member Jeff Pritchard showed up and he arrived at 10:17.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I don't see anybody in the.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, John. Appreciate it. It is quite a process. There's a lot of vetting of these projects. So going through all of those multiple reviews, I think we can feel pretty good about the projects that do rise to the top and are funded. And I know we're looking forward to getting our project complete by before football season this coming fall. It's kind of critical for us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you so much.
John.
Okay, so next up on the agenda is the director's update, and I will hand it over to Kenji.
Thanks, Chair Stevens. To start out, Steve, thanks so much for having us. This is absolutely amazing. I love coming up here. And for those who are online, we're looking at a view of the runways. Mount Hood is behind Catherine, who's on the screen, and it's a great place. My son loves coming here because he goes up to the top of the parking garage and just the plane watches all the time. And I told him that we'd be taking a tour of the new terminal, and he's like, "Can I come?" I was like, "No, dude."
Very soon, we will visit.
Very soon, very soon. But we always appreciate the port and your hospitality. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
One other thing I want to mention real quick is we have a new hire in the room. Ermi Bunkel joined us on Monday, and he will be part of Alex's team, and he will be working on contracts and procurement. He's in the middle of a training as well right now, so he probably can't talk, but that's what's going on. With that, I will move to my presentation. I will share. It might take a second or so. Let's see. Okay, here we go. And let's see if it works okay and I can click. Okay, so the agenda, one of the things that happened last month was we presented the resiliency report. And this was Betty's capstone project. She was really interested in resiliency, and she worked with a lot of the airports and a lot of folks around the state to come out with this study. This was really undertaken at the direction of, was under HB 3058. Representative Evans introduced that. And so what we'll be doing right now is just going through the role of Oregon's airports, the history of the Cascadia subduction zone threat, and just talking about sort of the contents of the report. So I'll go ahead and just get started. As I said, it was sponsored by Rep. Evans. It passed in May 2023. It required ODAV to study airport resiliency and make that report by the end of last year. And unfortunately, we didn't get any funding. Surprise, right? So we did the best that we could. Kristen looked at me like, yeah, we know. And we got it submitted on time, and it was presented to both committees earlier this year, January 11th and 12th,
Yeah.
which is great. Brief history of the Cascadia subduction zone event. We all know there's a huge plate boundary off the coast, and it's going to cause a big earthquake, measure 9+. And it's a 620-mile long subduction zone. It's overdue. That's all I can say. And it could happen anytime. And we definitely need to be prepared. If you look, 10 million people live in the moderate to severe impact zone, and 3.7 million of that in Oregon, in Western Oregon. So think about this: when the earthquake happens, some people have been through earthquakes. It's real short. It's like, yeah. But this event is going to be 5 to 7 minutes. Think of the earth rolling 5 to 7 minutes. There's going to be liquefaction, subsidence, lateral spread, deformation, and like we saw in Japan too, the likelihood of a tsunami is extremely high. Trees will fall, infrastructure will fall. Think about the infrastructure below ground as well: natural gas lines, water lines, sewer. Pop, it all goes. There's some examples right there. Some pictures from Alaska. You see the roads just cracked wide open. The tsunami, we saw the videos of that coming out from Japan. It was just shocking, and that's likely to happen here as well. Thinking about the recovery time, it's going to take a long time to recover. Major highways, 6 to 12 months, and that's optimistic, right? Electricity, 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months on the coast, or even longer, because you think about all the infrastructure that's gone down. So these are optimal, and they came out of the Oregon Resilience Plan that came out in 2013. But there's more people, more infrastructure, and our infrastructure is also getting older. To reopen a runway, you got to have a runway that's not busted, right? Because planes need to land on something that they're not gonna break something on landing. So cracks have to be less than 3 inches deep. The lips can't be greater than 3 inches. You have to have clear markings, right? You can't see, you can't land. Safety areas have to be clear of obstructions. And if liquefaction is suspected or the water's been over the runway, you got to proof roll it. So that's a big roller that goes over it just to make sure it's okay. Estimated recovery time this is for airports. Immediately none, unless PDX has that big, great project done, right? Then we can expect it much faster. Most of the functional airports will be east of the Cascades. So we're going to be relying heavily on Central and Eastern Oregon after this big event. So what we proposed, or the resiliency report, is really a statewide airport resiliency assistance grant program. It was suggested that the grant be used to purchase resiliency equipment for Oregon's publicly owned public use airports. We're hoping for a 2-year pilot program funded at $10 million a year for a total of $20 million. And the question goes, who administers the grant, right? Because it takes time, people. And there's a suggestion that it could be done by either ODAV or the Office of Emergency Management. Office of Emergency Management always runs a Spire grant program, which is very similar. So that might be a great housing for that. And it's not likely going to be pursued in 2024 session for this type of grant, but hopefully something in 2025. Thinking about eligible pieces of equipment, you think about it, forklifts, heavy equipment, water, fuel, you name it, sweepers. And this came out of the polling of a number of airports as well. So Betty reached out to the airports and emergency managers, and this is an example from the. Yeah.
Was fire protection equipment considered as part of gear, especially for east of the Cascades with the smaller agencies that don't necessarily have the capabilities if something were to go bad? Just curious.
I don't know. I can check out with Betty. Do you have something?
I don't know. We have to check.
Yeah, well, we can check with Betty for it.
Okay.
Yeah. So the priorities for funding and what's needed is fuel storage. If you think about it, where's most of the aviation fuel located? It's right near here, right? About how far away is it, Steve?
It's located on the Willamette, just south of downtown. So in the St. John's, or just across from the St. John's area.
Yeah.
Just in the vicinity, yeah.
Yeah. And it's not hard. And so if we lose that, there goes most of our aviation fuel.
There are studies about that and the vulnerabilities that are both ongoing, and some of those have been concluded, yeah. And I know that there's a separate initiative to address, or to at least identify and begin to address some of those vulnerabilities, both with the pipeline that serves Oregon from Washington. And that's not aviation, that's all fuels. But then also just the storage tanks and capacity in their locations, which are in a really vulnerable area as well.
Yep. So that's definitely one of the priorities to address that. And then, of course, communications with electricity out. Yeah, people have to find a way to communicate. So, and finding an alternative means of communicating for arriving and departing aircraft is a priority, just so there can be management of taking off and landing of airports. So communications equipment is key. And then pavement, like I mentioned before, is absolutely critical. You can't land aircraft on a broken runway. And no U.S. airport currently has a hardened runway. There are a couple examples around the world, in Japan, and I know Portland. You modeled yours off of Sendai.
So yes, whenever it's appropriate, I can certainly add comments.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay. Thank you for acknowledging. Yes, we are in the process, and we've received both state and federal money to do the preliminary design for a seismically resilient runway. Not a complete runway, because our two runways are over 11,000 feet in length, but something that would be resilient. We're looking at something in the range of 6,000 to 7,000 feet of one of our two runways, which should be the south runway. We've already done the geotech analysis on it to determine which sections of that runway are on the most seismically stable soils, as well as just substructure underneath it. That runway is a concrete runway right now, so there's the additional factors of how you would construct this, given that there is a very viable concrete runway in that place right now. So we are doing the engineering design for how would we stabilize the runway, and then also how would we connect that to the unstable sections of that. How would we ensure that that runway still stays functional? And what we're looking at right now from a design perspective, because if you're familiar with what happened with the Sendai in Japan, at the conclusion of their very large seismic event, which would be similar to our Cascadia, they were inundated by a tsunami, and it washed through that airport and did some significant damage. But as soon as the waters receded within a few days, they were able to get out and basically clean the debris off the runway and had a very structurally sound runway that had been left in place, even though it had been covered during the tsunami, that they were be able to operate off of within just a few days. Theirs was set on pilings. I can't remember exactly how far on center, but not very far, like 10 feet or more on center for the entire length of this runway. We are looking at something that is more the preliminary geotech and preliminary engineering that has been done to design this are looking at something that is more like a deep soil mixing, perhaps down as deep as like 80 feet, so that both the soil that the runway sits on, the runway substructure, and the runway itself acts like one large giant bar. And essentially, if the soil around it begins to move or liquefy, it essentially floats on it as if it would float on a very large body of water. So they're looking at one large stabilized 6,000 or 7,000 feet long, 80 feet deep structure that will essentially stay in place while everything else around it moves. The price tag for that is significant. We don't have a full price tag, but it is orders of magnitude above what a normal runway costs. So, and it is not something that typically the FAA or any other agency funds, because seismic resiliency is something that is relatively new. So there are some changes being made to AIP eligibility for this. Hopefully, we've certainly had a lot of conversations with FEMA and their ability to potentially fund this. When the president was when the president was visiting Portland in 22, we did a tour of the airport, or he actually came here and we did a tour and we talked about it and showed that. And very thankfully, he had the FEMA deputy administrator along with him, so showed that what we were trying to do and achieve with both. And we'll talk about resiliency for our facility, but we're building in resiliency for our facilities as well as the resiliency for our runway. We've also done a economic analysis of the value of the seismic run or seismically stable runway and its value to not just this region, but the entire state, and what it would do in the post Cascadia event of a post Cascadia. And yes, it has a much greater than one-to-one value for the region and for the state, and what it will do to support recovery efforts and return to levels of some level of normal activity. But yes, it's our goal. You know, we have a very large capital program appetite here as well. And so, including rehabilitation of other runways and taxiways. And so we are trying to slot that major construction effort in among our very other large appetite of taxiways and runways that have to be redone. But the goal is to be doing that. Yeah. very hopefully by the end of the decade, or certainly within the 10-year period that starts, now, that our goal is to reconstruct that and have a section of that runway be seismically resilient that serves the entire state, actually.
Great. Thanks, Steve. And I gotta say, from what you told me in the past, that the new terminal will be one of the safest places in the the west of the Cascades that it'll
When we take the
provide.
tour this afternoon, you can see we've been building in seismic resiliency to all of our improvements in all of our facilities. And the terminal complex that we built, or that we're building right now, is one of those. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So back on the report, as we talked about, liquefaction and submersion is going to be an issue, and equipment to actually be able to verify your rolling is going to be a critical need. Water and sanitation is always going to be a critical need, right? So you need water to survive, and sanitation, well, you don't want to get sick. So, Bill.
Yeah, so my question, so biased on the fact of where I live.
Yeah.
When we're talking resiliency at the state level, it's always been brought up, heavy lift helipads are correct.
Yes, absolutely.
Because that's how things are going to get distributed around for several days.
Yep.
And that would be part of the thing. Is that?
That's in the report for sure.
Okay, that's in the report.
Yep.
And then the other thing is for cities, it's not with you guys, but there's a popular purchase now that they make these trailers that you hook on the back of any pickup truck, and it's a generator with a satellite link that hooks you up to the internet, so you can communicate out. And so most mid-sized cities and small cities like mine are buying these trailers, and that's how you put them into a tsunami safe place, and then they pull them out.
Yep, communications equipment is absolutely
easily bought now. They're just standard purchases.
Yep, and don't forget, everybody should have their go bag, right?
Sure.
Do you have yours, Bill?
Do I?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. Just making sure. Awesome.
And my sneakers.
Good.
Like hell.
Yeah. Tony, you were about to say something?
Oh, I think those generators that equipment was shown in one of the previous slides.
Oh, I didn't see it.
Yep. Generators, and then communications equipment like cells on.
Yeah, it's just it's a whole package trailer that connects you to satellite internet.
And then lighting would be great. Because with electricity out, right, you need some sort of lighting. So having that backup electricity to be able to light up runways, because otherwise it's VFR and it would just be limited to daylight operations. So that's criticality. Next steps for Sarah, and not Sarah Lucas, but the Sarah program, is to begin building legislative support for the 2025 session, talking with Representative Evans and others in the legislature as well. Oregon has already poured in lots of money to make sure that buildings are resilient. And now, you survive the quake. Well, what happens afterwards? You need to survive it. And airport's going to be a critical way to make sure that supplies get in, to make sure people can survive. That's the Corvallis Airport, by the way. These were some of the folks who were involved on this list for their contributions.
Kenji, is this report going to be available for us to review?
Yes,
Okay.
it's available. It's done, so we can definitely get you copies.
Get a link on the website, maybe.
Oh, yes. Well, the website's another story. We'll talk about that in a
Right.
second.
Okay. Oh, somewhere.
Yeah. We'll get that linked up. Holly, you good?
I heard that.
Okay, awesome. All right. Next up, talk about website. Our website kind of stinks. Yeah, I just got a nod from Cresswell. So yeah, absolutely. Why does this stink? It has dead links, it's confusing, and it needs to be ready for better tools, right? You think about GIS, how we can use data, how we can do better reports. It doesn't work. Well, because there's a need for that, we need to drag the entire website into the 21st century. I'm reminded of the HTML days back in the early 90s, and I'm like, oh no, this can't be the end all be all of websites. So we kicked it off. We had conversations with ODAV to figure out the best approach. And, you know, coming from Travel Oregon, I love their website, but we don't need all the fancy, like, come to Oregon and all that stuff, because that's their side. They can do the videos and whatever, we make it interactive, cool. But I think functionality wise, if you look at the industry site, so you think about industry.traveloregon.com, that's simple, clean, gets information across in an appropriate way. Information is easy to find. So we're starting that process. Holly, Kristen, and I are heading it up. And we just, like I mentioned, we just had a fantastic conversation yesterday. And it's going to take a while, right? Because we each have to go through each of our departments and find out what's needed, what's broken, what works, and just make sure that we do that appropriately. And of course, we always love the board's feedback. We're also going to be looking for public feedback as well, right? Because we need to figure out what they access the most and what's important to them. So that wish list, yeah. And again, yeah.
Are you familiar with the Oregon Emergency Management's website specific to the Aspire program? If you haven't, take a look at it. They have integrated one of the features that ArcGIS has, which is story maps. And story maps is an amazing way of telling a story,
Yes.
especially when it comes to, you know, highlighting our airports and the features and functions of ODAV. But the Forest Service has been utilizing that a lot recently,
Yep.
especially in the aftermath of the big fires to kind of tell people. But anyways,
No.
talking GIS integration, we're looking at that too in our agency.
Yeah, you're preaching the choir, man. You know it. It's like, how do we leverage data, right? And you're spot on, 100% right. And where's Brandon? There he is. I'm sticking him through the process of learning GIS to make sure that we get all our airport data onto GIS. So other like, for example, city planners can look at our airports and potentially even the surface. And we're working in the Century West as well to hopefully import some of that data, just for not only for planning, but for example, other agencies are interested where your airports, energy departments, like where your airports, can we locate facilities there? What are the ways we can partner? So the data is so valuable. And I love the idea of having that on there, because you're right, the forestry department tells a story, especially where the fires are, you know, how many acres has been impacted. It's all on GIS.
Chair Stevens has a question.
Yes, Chair Stevens.
Yeah, so Kenji, is the ODAV website, is it tied directly to the state website? And is that going to be in them? I just asked because, you know, I've been through this whole web design process and getting a new web product, and it's, you know, tied to our sponsor organization. So it's just kind of, there can be some inherent challenges to with that process. I'm just curious.
Yes, and yes, and yes. So it is tied to the state system. And it's on a SharePoint platform. I think it's like V4X or something that we'll be working with. But the folks that we're working with, ODOT, and the one of the contractors that they work with, is to really help develop some of the templates, and they'll set up the pages, and then we fill in the content. So that's the general idea. And of course, because we're going through the service providers through ODOT, that they're aware of the constraints that we have in terms of state agencies, what we can and can't do. So yeah, it is part of the state system, but I think we can make it better, right?
Yep.
So that's the website redesign. And Oak Ridge, we've been talking this for a year, maybe? It's making progress, right? So the application for the EDA grant, we're pushing off a couple of weeks because we got some fantastic news. If you look at the list of letters of support, and well, I didn't put them in there, but we just had a conversation with NASA, and they are on board pending a Space Act agreement. So we're waiting to get the bare bones of that, so we can actually put it into our EDA grant that they'll be a participant. So that's huge news. That NASA's got some cachet, right? It's really cool. So there's definite positives on that. As a backup, we're also going to apply for a Connect Oregon grant as well. Just to make sure, right? You don't put all your eggs in one basket. So we're doing that. And that came at the suggestion of the board. And then we have letters of support from Congresswoman Salinas, the governor, Representative Conrad, Representative Kate, the Forest Service, Eugene Airport, of course. Thank you, Catherine. Port of Portland. Thank you, Steve. The Fire Safe Council, City of Oak Ridge School District, Emergency Management, Department of Forestry, Fire Marshal, State Police, Overwatch Aero. Thank you, Sarah. And we're anticipating some from Erickson Aircraft. And then Sarah, what's your
Coastal Airstrike.
Coastal Airstrike as well. And then we're also talking with Lane Community College as well. So there's some great opportunities there, and that's where the more pending comes in. So we're making progress. Things are looking really, really good. So I'm very pleased to say I was just tickled when we talked with NASA. Sorry.
And
and that's
you
it.
do you think you have enough letters of support from diverse interests? Because I'm sure as a board, we can drum up some more support if you think you need it in different areas.
Yeah. No, in terms of, yes, I'd like to pick you up on your offer. No, we don't have. The more letters of support from more diverse interests that we get, the better, right? It's Jeff, we'd love to get one from drone responders. So if you talk to Charles, that'd be great.
I would love to reach out to him.
Okay.
I
We
really
don't
think
have
you
to
need one from, I think you need one from Travelling County. So I'm happy to facilitate that.
Okay, that sounds good. And I actually have a letter template for destination marketing DMOs, so destination marketing organizations as well. So I can send that to you. Oh, I protocol, Catherine.
Shelley was offering that.
Yeah.
Lane
Okay.
Oak Ridge is in Lincoln County, and being past chair, they could offer up a letter of support or could approve a letter.
Perfect. Yeah. The more letters that we have, it shows that to the Economic Development Agency that it's a program that's well supported by them. So thank you.
Would you like a letter from the fire department there as well? They're part of the city, but that would have impact, seeing as one of the arguments made for this project is fire related. I can reach out to them if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and then by the way, I'm going to ask you because we're potentially doing a demo project this summer at Oak Ridge, flying drones. You interested?
Always.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Any other questions? Jim, you've been quiet. Is he there?
Hand is raised.
Oh, there he goes. There he goes. Jim.
Kent, you did a really good presentation, particularly in the emergency management portion of today's presentation. Just because of the enormity of the implications of a Cascadia zone subduction, hundreds, if not thousands, of questions, still remain unanswered. And I'd kind of like to talk about how do we move this to a next step. For instance, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but I feel like I really don't know what are the duties, roles, responsibilities of the department, and likewise, what are the responsibilities of our board? What decisions will we have to make in the event and when it happens? How will those things come about? And I don't really want to drill into numerous issues, but I do feel that we need to take this to another step, that we need to dive into some of these issues more thoroughly. You know, how will we make decisions in the event that we may not even have a quorum of board members available to speak? You may not have, you know, staff members to do, you know, typical work that you would see on a daily basis. So perhaps a way to do this would be to have a special session or a part of an agenda of a future meeting that at least we, as a board, bring to the meeting questions that we would have that we think that we're going to have to know the answers to, so that when we do go to the state legislature for funding, I'd like to see us to be a little bit more prepared for, you know, these are the issues and problems that we identify. I mean, you know, as you were talking, just a few things popped up for airports to try to get back in business again, is they may not even have operating structures to work in. So their buildings may have collapsed or, you know, been wiped out. So how will we function as an organization immediately following subduction zone, and what are the priorities that we feel that we must address as a board? And, you know, I'm sorry to, you know, just kind of lay a few things out on the table for us, but to me, it really feels that this is an event that could happen at any moment. And we really have not had very many discussions about how will we operate and who will take on what responsibilities, and how do we make determinations of how to fund our airports so that they can be resilient. So I just wanted to open up the door to the suggestions that I think we need to dive into this emergency management process a little bit more. Another example is, how do we operate with emergency management services? Who's going to be running the show? You know, we've got, I know we're going to have some, you know, not conflicts, but challenges between the federal government, state agencies, and local jurisdictions. So how will these things operate? So I'd like us to have some time to kind of think about what are the questions that we feel as a board that we really need to ask and have some discussions over. And then prioritize where are the ones that are the most important, that will increase our resiliency to such a devastating emergency. So just thinking out loud here.
Yeah, thanks for that, Jim. Kenji, I'm kind of thinking maybe we could schedule a presentation from the Oregon Emergency. I'm gonna not get the acronym right for the Oregon Department of Emergency Management. So that just kind of an overview. I know, you know, airports around the state have had, many of us, 3 different reviews from 3 different agencies. Oregon Emergency Management being one of them, FEMA is another, and then Department of Homeland Security. And so a lot of those plans are in silos, and some of them have, you know, one interpretation of surviving airports, and other plans have a different interpretation. But it'd be interesting because it'd have, just from a state agency perspective, to hear what Oregon Department of Emergency Management envisions and how we would function, and support them in, you know, a big event like this.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with him and the chair's statements. I think also, since this is a state board and we are supporting state efforts, hearing directly, Catherine is correct. I mean, we've all, if you're a major commercial service airport, you've been visited by both FEMA, Department of Homeland Security, and OEM. But since this is a state agency and ultimately post-emergency, this agency will support state efforts, it'd be best to hear from OEM primarily as to what their expectations of us from a planning and preparation and funding perspective, what they would like to see, and then also what their preparations and plans are post-event. I think they're probably our most significant voice for this board to listen to.
Can I just add to that? I agree with everything Catherine and Steve said. I would just go back to strategic planning efforts for the department so that we can just refocus. I don't see that on the topics list for 2024, but I'm sure it's somewhere in there, but just kind of keeping that floating to the top because I think all this ties back into that.
Thanks, Sarah. That's absolutely right in terms of strategic planning. We haven't forgotten about that. It's budget and
Yeah.
also
Understandable.
process, so.
Yeah.
But Jim, you bring up a great point in terms of operations, right? What's gonna happen? What's the implementation plan? We won't be the lead agency on that, and all of you are correct in terms of ODEM, Officer, the emergency management's going to be taking lead. And I actually will have a meeting with their director in the not too distant future. We're setting up choosing a time, and I can bring that as a topic of discussion for a potential brief out as well. One of the topics that we're talking about as well was I had thrown into our legislative concepts ideas that we sent out with the governor for 2025 about looking at a study at potential locations on the east side of the Cascades for a fuel hub or fuel depot. And I'm not talking about just small tanks, but I'm talking about a fuel farm. And at the suggestion of our DAS CFO and our policy advisor, Kelly, she suggested we actually just talk with emergency management and their policy advisor too and say, hey, this likely belongs under you because you get the funding through FEMA to do this sort of major infrastructure project. So we're going to start having those conversations as well and see where that leads us as well. And I understand that the CEI hub is looking at some hardening within the next decade or so. So I know there's multiple things going on, but I think there are some potential for resiliency on that side.
And Catherine, I'm sure knows this too, that the state and both FEMA have done a fair bit of analysis on this topic as well, and are already made some assumptions of how, either with the vulnerabilities we have or the resources that will or will not be available afterwards, how they will continue to operate even given those challenges. So I think there's a lot of good information, a lot of good work that's already been done on this, and certainly to that point, understanding how the strategic role of this and the priorities of this board and this agency support the larger initiatives in the state, just making sure that we're aligned so that we are listening to the right issues, approving the right infrastructure, and making available the things that are going to be necessary for the states and other airports that OEM and other agencies are going to rely on. I think you're absolutely right, as a critical part of the strategic plan for the agency.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep, I think a good topic for an upcoming board meeting. And, certainly we can kind of share all of the different aspects from our own airports of what we've got in place. Eugene, I've got an agreement with FEMA to essentially come in and take over half of our airfield for their operations.
Madras is going through that process right now as well. Yeah. Heather Madras to Redmond.
All right. Any other questions for Kenji? Okay, and then Holly, I'm gonna just check with you to see, is this a time certain, or can we just keep moving on into the core grant approval?
Okay, it's 11:09, and the core grant approval looks like it's scheduled for an hour long. So if you want, we could start that and then maybe do lunch after about 12:30-ish. Does that sound good for everyone?
Does that work for everybody?
Yes, it sounds good.
Okay. Great. Well, we will move right into the my sheet here is the core grant approval. And I believe Shelley Humble, who's the ARC chair, along with a couple of ODAV staff members are going to be doing this presentation.
Shelley, if you want, you could sit right here next to Kristen. That's an available.
To the table,
Yeah.
make trouble.
All right,
How are
thank
you?
you, Chair Stevens and Good Morning Board. And yes, it is the most exciting day of the year, of course, for our program, because it's when our new grants are awarded. I'm just gonna go ahead and get our presentation up here. And I wanted to make one quick note that Kenji neglected to say, and that is our new employee Irby is also filling our second grant coordinator program. So you'll be seeing more of and hearing from him in the future. And then, of course, we're pleased to have Shelley Humble here, our Aviation Review Committee Chair. She'll be sharing a little bit about the ARC review process this year and some of the discussion and how that went. So we'll just start with giving a little bit of information regarding the core cycle this year. So it was our 8th grant cycle since the inception of the ASAP grant program. Funding of this cycle is the third that includes revenues previously earmarked for the rural program. The additional monies again allow for increased funding of 53 grants, which are generally economic development projects, assisting primarily rural, non-NIBIS federally funded airports. This was also the third cycle in which our ACT grading was done in cohorts in a virtual meeting. So we divided up the members into groups, and this year they each had 13 grants to review, which was close to double in the past year. So we had 66 total applications for review this year. And that again was a process that has been well received by the ARC members. And then similar to last year, our maximum grant request was increased by the State Aviation Board from $150,000 to $250,000. And that was done at the June 2023 board meeting last year. So Shelley, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you now.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I would really want to give a big shout out to Andrea and Alex. They've really streamlined our process that we have, working with the cohorts and even our ACT review. Each year, it just seems to be so much more streamlined, so much easier a task to perform. And I know we're all busy. And it just seemed we got it done in less time than what we expected. There were some robust conversations. It's always a double-edged sword because you want to get, and Kenji was great this year going out to airports, introducing them to the core and what's available for small airports. I'm a small airport. It is vitally important that the core grant system stays in place. It's one of the few ways that small airports can continue with their infrastructure. Most smaller airports, non-NIPIAS, just don't have any other funding available. So it is really, really important. And I'm so thankful that the Oregon Department of Aviation actually put this grant together. That being said, a couple of the topics that we did talk about is additional training. I think with some of the smaller airports, they have maybe a staff of 1. Bristol has a 1.6 FTE. So it really falls down to someone who it may not be their expertise or even have the time. So we've talked about, and I believe most of the members of the ARC had a favorable reply and are willing to mentor some of the airports that have never done it or are struggling to get a positive outcome. I know it's really tough, especially for priority 3. That's the other discussion that I believe that the ARC was in favor of, is looking at the priority 3. That is economic development. Usually by the time we get through all of our priority 1 and priority 2, there's no money left. And so if we can look at a different way of working it, change the administrative roles, or maybe, I don't know, something to look at to earmark some of that for some of the smaller airports that have no other available funding, but need projects desperately. But all in all, it was well received. It was really great that we got 66 grants. It's unfortunate we didn't have enough money to fund everything, but I think all the projects that were funded were very good projects.
Thank you, Shelley. So, we definitely want to plan this year to, work with any of the ARC members who are willing. We'll reach out to Shelley to hopefully get some kind of training, or as she mentioned, the mentoring, or maybe kind of do a roundtable with any of the airport sponsors who want to participate. So, especially coming up for the next grant cycle, we can hopefully help them to, be able to get those applications filled out, in a little better ways, so that the ARC has a better way to review them, not having to guess or make assumptions, but able to really give them a fair and appropriate score on their applications. So just to go over our applications, again, there was 66 submitted in total, almost $6.9 million, and we had a total funding availability of $4.5 million for the cycle. So priority one, which is our FAA AIP grant match, there were 25 applications at a total request almost 2.5 million. Priority two are resiliency requests, and we had 4 at a total of $670,000. And then priority three, there were 37 applications, a total of about almost 3.8 million there. And just to make a note, we had 11 applications that were submitted as requests, match requests for FAA BIL funded projects. Our statute for priority one specifically is for AIP only. So although they were FAA match requests, they are in priority three. So we'll go ahead and just kind of go through the Aviation Review Committee recommendations, and then we'll turn it over to the board for any questions, and then motions for approval. So for priority one, the Aviation Review Committee recommended approval of all applications submitted in accordance with the Oregon Administrative Rule, as listed in the attachment, which I provided that to board members here in the room, and then also was provided by email. So there were 24 projects recommended for approval, a total of 51 million in total project costs and 2.4 in funding request. The one application that was not recommended for approval by the ARC was from City of Brookings, and this application was a request for retroactive reimbursement. Their project was actually completed last October. Our core cycle A application period deadline was November 3rd, 2023, and for Oregon Administrative Rules, a project isn't eligible for funding if it's completed prior to the application period deadline. So unfortunately, they didn't submit any applications last year, which is when this one really would have fell into. So that was the one exception for priority one. Priority two, the Aviation Review Committee recommended approval of all applications. Again, there were 4 projects, a total of 1.325 million in total project costs and $670,000 in funding. And then finally, in priority three, as Shelley mentioned, we didn't have enough funds to be able to fund all of the priority three projects. So of those that were the 35, 21 were recommended for approval. Almost 6.9 million in total project costs and almost 1.4 million in funding requests in that one. Along with those approvals, the ARC recommended 2 applications that were right below the cut line for approval, contingent on funding availability. So if one of the approved priority 1 or 2 cancels and there are enough funds, we would move down to those 2 to provide funding for those projects. So, board, are there any questions? It looks like I see Jim, you've got a question.
Yeah, Shelley, I wanted to tell you what a great job you did, and congratulations on getting through your first year of chairing the committee. And thank you for your presentation. On multiple occasions, we've heard that there was some robust conversation going on during the ARC review. I'm curious, is what were your greatest challenges that you had this year over last year's? If you wouldn't mind sharing with them, what were those things that were so robust or that was so challenging for the committee?
I think the biggest robust discussion we had really came down to the bill discussion, whether or not the bill grants should have been in priority 1 versus priority 3. And then we had quite the conversation trying, there were several airports this year that turned in multiple grants. And then, so we did a very lengthy exercise to try and see our criteria is, we established it several years ago, I believe, when you were chair. The criteria that we utilize, and one of them is whether or not, when we're looking at having to make a cut, whether or not the airport has turned in multiple grants. So we can spread the funds to as many possible airports as possible. And we struggled with that. There were several, Scappoose comes to mind, Cresswell comes to mind. I mean, there's several of them that had multiple grants. And then we had some new ones that it was their first time. And all the projects are worthwhile projects. It's just either maybe not knowing how to answer them or what the board or what the application is looking for. And they were really close. And so we were trying to see, is there a way to bring some of those that were up, because the other, for example, Scappoose or Cresswell already had 2 grants or 3 grants that were going to be funded. Is there a way to move them up? But either way, there was just no logistical way that we could do it after we looked at all the criteria. But we did spend probably a half hour, 45 minutes on that process, just trying to make sure that all airports are seen and their applications are vetted so that everybody gets a fair chance.
Thank you. Great job, Shelley.
Thank you.
Sarah Stevens.
Yeah, thank you so much for your work on this, Shelley. I know it's actually quite an in-depth process for you all to review all of those and make good decisions. I'm wondering, so that's unfortunate, the statutory language limitation around bill. I'm wondering if, I mean, of course, you know, that's kind of the first time we've gotten that kind of funding. So I don't know if it's maybe worth going back and looking at asking for a change in that statute to include all, you know, funding of airports, if that can then qualify for a core match or not, or if that's too much of a heavy lift for something that most likely won't happen in the near future.
I can speak to that. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So we were able to kind of last minute get this into the short legislative session to have a statutory amendment, which would just remove the words airport improvement projects, which is what is limiting it at the moment, to just say FAA grants. So it is in the omnibus, the transportation omnibus bill. So for better or worse, we don't know, you know, of course, where that's going to go. If it does not pass this session, we'll just basically reintroduce it next session.
Great, thanks for taking that proactive step.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Not really a question. I don't envy that. Just reading them and thinking what you guys were going through with all of them. It's a heavy lift,
Yeah.
for sure. So thank you for that.
And this year it was additionally a little more difficult because since 2020, we actually have funded every request. So I know that it did hurt the ARC members to have to say that there were some that didn't get it this year. So as Shelley talked about a little bit, you know, we're always open to hear anybody's ideas. If you have some thoughts on where maybe these airports find other funding or possible changes that we could make in order to help facilitate.
Something we wanted to
wanted to see what the board thought too. We haven't thought through this entire process, so it's just kind of an idea at the moment, but of maybe moving forward, cycle 9, of having the opportunity for grantees to come and say, do a 60, 90, 120-second presentation during the individual cohort meetings, not the full 150 days, right? We have 66 applications again, but if we were doing it in the smaller cohort meetings, where there's, 6, 8, 10, 12 applications, and they have roughly the same piece, the grantee can come and present what's, their report, what's important about the project, why they need it. And then it would also provide them an opportunity with the ARC members and ODAV staff to kind of have training on maybe their application wasn't great, or maybe it was awesome, and, we could talk about it. So wanted to just see what the board thought about that potentially for cycle.
And it limits the people who don't have staff, right, or don't have the capability of sending a staff to say, would be give them, I'm worried that it give them a disadvantage, not for a fair reason.
I would assume Teams would be an option though, right? You wouldn't expect in person.
So,
Maybe to address that, an idea would be, if they didn't have a staff that's able to do so, Andrea or me or I could meet with that maybe separately, try to represent that in some way so they wouldn't have that disadvantage, but that's a good point.
So I know we have
Thank you.
draft motions. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna appreciate Shelley's comments and recognizing that, of looking beyond the tier 1 level and ensuring that all applicants got fair and look across the entire spectrum. I know, having looked at some as well, there's limited funding and you're trying to prioritize that, ensuring that everybody got an equitable approach to their application, regardless of what level of tier that they fell into, I think is very important for that. And then, of course, the follow-up to perhaps in the future assist if there are other sources of funding for those that just don't rise or are beyond what we're capable of funding. I appreciate that acknowledgement.
And I'd like to add one other thing. The one thing that kind of surprised me this session, this application process, is we only had 4 priority 2. With all of the talk about Cascadia and the rainstorm we had, where the airport was without power for 14 days. But Corps gave us funding 3 years ago, and we put in generators. So the airport was open, actually, even before Eugene Airport this time, because our rain thawed faster than Catherine's did.
Yeah,
But
thanks for rubbing it in, Shelley.
we're operational, so we were open. If they would have needed, we have
Right.
ODART, which is an emergency group of pilots that bring resources in and out. They actually utilized Aurora this year during the emergency, but they knew that we were available. They knew that they could bring supplies or take people out, whatever the case may be, because we had those generators. So that's really a testament to the core project. But how we get the word out for priority 2, how important it is, and the fact that it's good funding, and normally most of the priority 2 do get funding.
Yeah, there's typically only, there really only are a few usually in priority 2, and they pretty much always get.
Yeah.
Very valuable.
Shelley, I think your comments about, airports that have submitted multiple grants, good on them for trying to maximize what they're able to receive, but perhaps we need to look at that as a board and go back and look at maybe we say you can have multiple grants, but they have to be in different category, in different priorities. And then that way, perhaps we'll be able to stretch a little bit more into that priority 3 to get more airports funded.
One of the things we looked at last year with the Oregon Spire grant that OEM did, I was on the review committee for that. To address that situation, we established scoring benchmarks, and based on how people scored, we would move on to the next category. And that way, every category had funding Then once every category had funding, whoever had the highest scores, priority one, would then be next on the list. So if you scored, I think it was below 70, well, you didn't make the cut for priority one, then, you know, we continue to move down the line, but then you'd still have another opportunity if the threshold wasn't met. So perhaps that's something we could look at for next time, unless the statutes say that we can't do that.
Yeah.
I think it has to be changed by statute. Yeah, so we would have to decide as a board and then ask for language change.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. We are going through an administrative rules review process for both the entire ASAP programs currently. So it is opening up some discussion internally and then also with DOJ to see if we can better address some of those concerns. We are limited by statutes currently, but we have some flexibility that we can work with.
All right, any other comments, questions?
See any in the chat?
I'm sorry, Holly, did you say you didn't see any?
Yeah, I didn't see anybody in the room. No.
Okay. All right, well then we will move on to motions. I'm going to read the motions, and then if someone wants to make if somebody wants to pull one out separately, please do that. And otherwise, I would suggest that somebody make a so move motion for all of them, if that is appropriate, Holly.
Yep.
Okay, very good. All right, so here are the draft motions before us today. Approve application submitted in accordance with OAR 738-124-00358A, Priority 1, as recommended and ranked by the Aviation Review Committee for Priority 1. Approve application submitted in accordance with OAR 738-124-00358A, B, Priority 2, as recommended and ranked by the Aviation Review Committee for Priority 2. Approve applications submitted in accordance with OAR 738-124-00358A, C, Priority 3, as recommended and ranked by the Aviation Review Committee in Priority 3. Approve funding authorization for 2023-2024 core grants in an amount not to exceed 4.5 million. And that is the draft motion. I just need a motion on put forward by one of the board members.
So moved.
Jeff moved.
Second.
Sarah second.
Okay. Move and second. Do we have any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Those motions pass. All right, great work, everyone. Thank you so much for everyone's time and effort on that. And then Holly, is this the point where you thought we should take a break?
Well, it's only 11:34.
Yeah.
This is up for 20 minutes, so we
We
could.
have core or the summer.
Yeah, we could do the SOAR projects. Sound like a plan?
That sounds good.
Okay, we will move on to Tony and the ARC chair doing the SOAR project review.
Hey, 1 second while I share my screen. We've seen, yeah, okay. Well, good morning. I'm going to give an update on our Cycle 5 SOAR project requests. I'm going to give an overview of the administrative rule for SOAR and an update on cycles 1 through 4, the project status, a current cash balance, and our project prioritization. And then I'm going to present our new Cycle 5 SOAR project requests and with motions for our request for approval for the board. SOAR is the state-owned airport relief fund. This is the same aviation and fuel tax revenue that goes into the aviation system action program. And then while CORE gets 75% of those funds, 25% are allocated for state-owned airports. And it is in the same chapter 738 of Oregon Administrative Rule. And it is in 738-124-0090, where it explains the SOAR program and the application process, review by the ARC and approval by the board. The first portion of that rule explains that the department shall prepare a list of projects, and they will meet the purposes described in OAR 738-124-0010 parentheses 4. When you look in the Secretary of State website, that administrative rule is actually parentheses 3. We just had made some rulemaking changes in the last year or two, and just we have identified a couple housekeeping corrections that we're going to make to that rule, but it is number 3. And number 3 states that the purpose of the SOAR program is to distribute funds to state-owned airports for safety improvements recommended by the board and local community airports and infrastructure projects at public use airports. In my opinion, a little confusing the way that reads, but it is for state-owned airports for safety and infrastructure projects. The criteria that these projects need to meet are in OAR 738-124-0060 and parentheses 2B. So B is the correct subsection of that rule. And I've pasted the criteria in the slide. It shows A through E, and those are for reducing transportation costs for Oregon businesses or improved access to jobs and sources of labor in Oregon, resulting in economic benefit for Oregon, connecting elements of Oregon's aviation system in a way that will measurably improve utilization and efficiency of the system. The project is ready for construction or implementation, including whether the project has any unique construction readiness, project implementation challenges, or possible delays, and has a useful life expectancy that offers maximum benefit to Oregon. I'm not mistaken, these are the same criteria that core projects are subject to. And then, of course, the ARC reviews the projects. They don't rank them, but they do recommend to the board. And I can, if Shelley has any comments that she'd like to add on that when we get to the cycle 5 portion a little bit later, welcome any input from the ARC. And then, of course, the board approves the projects. Just updates on the first 4 cycles. In cycle 1, all of the projects have been completed. In cycle 2, we have 2 projects that are carried forward. This is for the Prospect Runway Reconstruction Project. $2 million were awarded. We anticipate only using a little under $800,000 for matching funds for a Connect Oregon grant that was awarded in the previous round of Connect Oregon. And then our Malino Water and Fire Suppression Project, there's $422,000 remaining after we spent approximately $50,000 in design for that project. In cycle 3, some of the projects were completed. The projects that are carried forward include capital equipment for all airports, $100,000. Cape Blanco, the airport layout plan and planning update, obstruction removal for $105,000. At Cascade Locks, airport layout plan update and a pilot's lounge for $285,000. And at Pacific City, ramp paving and drainage improvements for the remaining amount of funds, $253,390.31 after completing the property acquisition back in 2020. Cycle 4, we have the Cape Blanco runway rehab and electrical improvements project, which is just shown here because the project's not completed yet. So that there's a $1,222,000 $779.20 remaining to be spent out of the current cash balance. So those projects total a little over $3.1 million, and those we're carrying forward. The cash balance as of January 23rd is just under $3.4 million. And we have talked about the priorities for the remaining SOAR projects because we don't have enough cash to complete all of the current projects and some of the priorities that we're looking at with the next cycle 5 requests. So those priorities are for safety and operational runways. That includes the Cape Blanco runway and electrical rehab project, the Prospect runway reconstruction project, and then our 2 new cycle 5 requests, which are for the Oak Ridge reconstruction and modernization project and the all state airport obstruction removal equipment acquisition. And then as a second priority, matching Connect Oregon applications, cycle 2, our Malino waterline and fire suppression project is our other priority as we apply for that in this current round. So our total priority projects come to just under $3.7 million. And that's not including an additional $200,000 for contingency and airport workers and administration funds that we're also asking for this round. Before I go forward, any questions on the overview of SOAR and the previous cycles? Okay. That brings us to our new cycle 5 requests. We have 2 applications for this round, as I mentioned previously. Kenji already did mention our Oak Ridge runway reconstruction and modernization project. There's quite a lot of information here in the packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions. This project will reconstruct the runway connecting taxiway and the apron, as well as introduce a lot of new advanced air mobility and UAM infrastructure that will help modernize and bring Oak Ridge into the future. Are there any questions on the Oak Ridge project for cycle 5?
So Tony, this is set up as an either or, right? It's if the other grant funding comes through, we don't need this funding, but this is making sure we have a backup plan. Is that right?
That's exactly right. We are very excited about the Economic Development Administration grant that we're going to be applying for, as Kenji mentioned, very soon. And we are also applying for the Connect Oregon grant, and that is going to be for the runway reconstruction only, just due to the amount of match that's required. And so that will fund runway reconstruction along with a couple items we had in the scope of work for windsocks, supplemental windsocks, and that's pretty much it.
So, looking for your point of clarification, it'll be a match for either. So, either one.
Right. So if the Economic Development Administration grant is successful, we will withdraw the Connect Oregon application.
Good.
Okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, thank you.
Although that would be really nice to have that much cash.
All right. Okay, any other questions on Oak Ridge? And then the second application for cycle 5 is for obstruction removal equipment acquisition. And this is a not to exceed of $250,000. We are looking for a piece of equipment that will operate a mulching attachment and can be transported. It's going to be based at our office in Salem, but transported to all 28 state-owned airports all across Oregon. And this is to remove any vegetation obstructions on state property at all of our state-owned airports. Any questions on this project? Shelley, do you have any comments? You want to add anything from the ARC?
I think there wasn't a lot of discussion on the equipment itself, except that it's something that could be utilized by other airports. You could utilize it at other airports if needed. The big thing was Oak Ridge, and there was wholeheartedly support. We all understand how important Oak Ridge Airport is, especially to firefighting during the summer. We get the helicopters that can't fit in Oak Ridge, especially with the deterioration of the runway right now. But it's just vital for Oregon to have that funding be put back into Oak Ridge and keep Oak Ridge an open and viable airport. So it was wholeheartedly supported.
Thank you.
So what happens with the Molino and Pacific City previous projects? They just stay on a waiting list until more money comes along.
Right, yeah, all of the carried forward projects from previous cycles will continue to be, they are approved by the board and they will just be waiting for sufficient funding, exactly. Yep.
Just making sure.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? So the cycle 5 requests, we are looking at $1.25 million for new projects between the Oak Ridge Runway project and the obstruction removal project or the equipment acquisition. We are also asking for the same $100,000 for contingency and $100,000 for the airport workers and admin fund that we have requested in previous SOAR cycles. That brings our total request to $1.45 million.
Is airport 1 year?
The biennium, for 2 years, that's right.
50,000.
Yep. Yeah, and on the contingency, I think we spent a total of $4,000 on the contingency from the previous cycle, and we're not carrying that forward. We're just going to continue to do a new request each of these cycles. Okay, so I did prepare 2 requests, one for the 2 projects that were recommended by the ARC, and then again our standing contingency and worker fund requests. And the first one is for the projects.
Okie dokie. So if you have more questions for Tony, and otherwise we'll move to the motion. See anything? So this would be a need for an approval, a motion for an approval of SOAR projects. So ODAV requests Aviation Board approve SOAR funding for the Oakway Runway reconstruction and modernization project and obstruction removal equipment acquisition as presented. Do I have a motion?
Make the motion as stated for the SOAR project in support of Oak Ridge Runway reconstruction and modernization project.
Bill seconds.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right, motion carries. Okay. And then I don't think I have this one on my chair's agenda, Tony. So is this just a separate motion needed?
Yes, for the $100,000 admin fee or fund and the $100,000 small project contingencies.
Okay, great. So we'll need a board motion for approval of SOAR projects. ODAV requests Aviation Board approval for $200,000 in cycle 5, which will go for 100,000 admin airport workers and 100,000 for small project contingencies. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Jeff moved. And Jen moved.
Second.
I'll be second.
Okay, great. Any further discussion on this? And all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries as well. Thank you,
And-
Tony.
Thank
Appreciate
you all.
that.
And just my point of clarification, I just wanted to double check. I want to make sure I'm mistaken or we didn't miss something, but I think Steve's motion was different than what Catherine had stated. I want to make sure we're covered on the obstruction removal equipment acquisition. Did I mention, or did I miss that, or?
Two separate.
Right.
Why don't we just repeat the motion?
Sure.
So I believe the motion was, and Steve probably paraphrased, but it's that we approve SOAR funding for the Oakway Runway Reconstruction and Modernization Project and obstruction removal equipment acquisition as presented.
Oh, that's how you.
Yes, okay,
That's how you
okay.
meant it.
As presented.
Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, so we are covered, or, okay, all right, thank you. I just wanted to
No,
make sure.
good point.
Can revote if you feel more comfortable.
Does-
Okay.
Makes you more comfortable.
So we're good?
I think we are.
I think we're good.
Okay,
Yes, okay.
great, okay. Okay, I'm gonna do a time check with Holly. We can do the state airports manager update if you want to keep moving on the agenda ahead of lunch.
So Tony, do you think 20 minutes is good or?
I think we could cut it in under 20.
Okay, take it away, Tony.
We can take a short break, or I'm happy to continue.
Or right at
What would the
lunch.
group like to do?
Do your thing and then we'll get lunch.
Okay.
Sounds good.
That even confirms it.
Yeah, lunch is not here yet. So. Okay.
You're on.
All right, I'm just going to share my other screen. I do have a fairly brief update for you all. They're good to go. Okay. So just carrying on into the airport's update, I'm going to share a little bit more about this photo in a little bit. Coming out of the winter weather that we had at this last couple of weeks, this is a photo of the Aurora State Airport. We had some, one second. Disconnected from the Bluetooth probably.
Oh, yeah, because we had his earpiece.
Stand by.
Just want to make sure you're not getting feedback on the, and for Teams attendees. There.
Music.
Okay. So Aurora, here in the valley, experienced quite a bit of icing, and we did have to close the runway and taxiways down for a couple of days, but fortunately that did not last terribly long, and we were able to get the airport reopened and re-inspected to make sure that it was safe and the conditions were reported appropriately. The gorge, as mentioned earlier, did get hit a little bit harder. This was weeks later, and it was still not quite thought out. So this is Cascade Locks, and it did have substantially more snow, but it finally did well as well. This has been an interesting and busy couple of months for airport maintenance. The port fence at Aurora was struck in two different occasions by two different vehicles and did cause some substantial damage.
Insurance companies pay.
Yeah, we're working on the insurance claims. And it was over the holidays and over the weekend and with winter weather and getting contractors out was a bit of a challenge, but we did get the fence repaired. And this is at Cottage Grove after the ice and heavy winds, and Cottage Grove, that area was severely affected by winter weather with the ice and winds. They were without power for over a week, I believe. And so we have been busy assessing and recovering from damage as well. Down at Cape Blanco, another strange occurrence of tires just naturally occurring in the woods. So we've been busy tracking that down and disposing of that, just keeping the area clean. It is near a trailhead for next to the state park, and so we're just trying to keep maintaining that area. And on the left picture, this is some new signage that we put up because there is a trail that is very close to the airport. So we're just trying to warn people out enjoying the scenery and taking a hike that to use caution and watch for aircraft and not go out onto the airfield. This photo was sent to me by Whoop. He's our part-time employee out at Joseph, and this is the new Pappy that we had installed out at Joseph back in the summer. So really a cool photo, and that was the introductory photo that I had shared as well. Really happy to see that that's functioning a lot better than the old one, and is being put to good use. This and the next few slides are really just carryovers from my previous presentation. I just wanted to reiterate that our priorities continue to be working on driver's training programs for the state-owned airports, and we will be bringing the VPD rule to the board later this year. We are still working on the volunteer program overhaul, and that'll be for all airports as well. And operations staff have been very busy with our regular annual 5010 inspections and master record updates. And we are also very busy trying to work through a backlog of new lease and hangar construction development at our airports. We're about halfway through the year of catching up on a big backlog of CPI adjustments on all 280 some of our lease agreements. So that has gone very well. Big shout out to Kevin for working through that every month. And we're halfway through, and then everyone's leases will be adjusted by the end of this year. And again, just a carryover from previous presentations, except we did have one VPD since our previous board meeting, and this one was at the end of the very end of the year. We had one VPD in November and then one in December. So, still occurring. They are down overall for the calendar year. And I think that's a big testament to the work and outreach that ODAV staff have done, but also the businesses, the tenants, and the airport users, through the fence property owners, that they have done as well. And big shout out to everyone for getting those numbers down. They are continuing. We are seeing, the occasional VPD, and our goal is still 0. So there's still more work to do. And again, we will be implementing the driver's training program and be bringing that VPD rule with the input from the open house and the rulemaking, the rule advisory committee that we had set up within the last year or two. Updates on projects for state airports. We just received the FAA's response to the EA rewrite for the Aurora State Airport obstruction removal project this week, and very timely. And there's still some comments for us to address, and we are working on that. The big news is there were 2 species that were previously listed as endangered that are no longer listed as endangered, and we believe this will help speed up the remaining portion of this review on the EA rewrite. So very good news there. And then, of course, after the EA, we will be working on appraisals and easement acquisition before we can construct. Malino, We are contracting for appraisals and easement acquisition for the properties that we don't have easements. For the properties that we own and or own easements on, we have awarded a contract. We have a pre-construction meeting next week to get those trees down by before nesting season begins in the beginning of April. So that work is going to be happening very soon, and we're very happy to get that portion done. Chillipan is the same as the other portion of Malino, where we are contracting for appraisals and easement acquisition. Other upcoming projects, we have the surface seal and markings project, which will be happening later this spring or summer at the Aurora State Airport. And we have been communicating impacts, runway closures that we're working to minimize for that project. And we will have more information well in advance before any closures occur. We will be sending out more information through GovDelivery and email as well. The master plan, our next PAC meeting is going to be March 12th. We did become aware of an issue on that project website where some of the links were not correct. So we did reschedule that for March 12th. That is where we're going to go over the forecast approval and just kind of an update, because it has been some time since our last PAC meeting. We're not going to introduce any other new content until we just kind of do this refresh, get everyone back together, and then we'll go from there. The Cape Blanco runway project, we are also we awarded on that, and we expect to construct this spring or summer as well. And then Prospect, we are bidding that this month and also hoping to construct this spring or summer as well.
A quick thing.
Yeah.
Just wanted to note on the issue that was discovered on the PAC materials, just want to give a shout out to the city of Wilsonville for letting us know about that issue. So thank you for letting us know.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure all the PAC members and the public had ample time to review all of the information. And so we have scheduled a meeting more than a month out, which gives plenty of time. We're happy to answer any questions in the next PAC meeting. Okay. And then just a notice on upcoming closures, basically for the projects that that I just covered for our state airports. Any questions?
It's been a while since, oh, sorry, Chair Steve, I didn't know if you had, Catherine, if you had a question or anything, but I was gonna say, it's been a while since we've had progress on that master plan, seeing as how long it took the FAA to do that, and there's a lot of new board members as well. Is it worth having some level or a discussion here about some level of update on what the forecast said and what the the process and that with the master plan prior to that meeting, that PAC meeting, just to get the board up to speed on both the status of I know that there's a bunch of other things going on that are, unrelated to the overall master plan, but to this very specific master plan, and what were both findings of the FAAs as well as the consultants' view on forecasts, and then, just where we are, what we're doing, and let that process, which is running separately with a PAC and all that, know, but just to bring the board and newer members up to speed on what's going on.
Yeah,
a brief update maybe at next month's meeting.
In the work session?
In the work session might be worthwhile.
Okay.
I don't know how others feel.
Yeah, I think it'd be beneficial.
Yeah,
I don't think it needs to be crazy detail.
No, not in detail, just
Work session actually is gonna be Connect Oregon 24 Aviation the Modal Review Committee review. That's gonna be our work session.
we could add a subject for that topic. We can definitely do an update. But that's what the next PAC meeting is definitely going to be for, just a refresh on the project overall, The FAA's comments on the working paper 1 on the forecast and existing condition chapters.
Yeah.
And then so their feedback on those chapters and the forecast, and then what the FAA ultimately approved.
Yeah,
Yep.
just like I said, well, not anything overly to prepare for, but just a, a few minute, 10-minute update on both the like you said, the FAA's comments, on the forecast, the consultants' forecasts, the FAA's feedback and comments on it, the existing conditions, and then the next steps.
Sounds good.
You're
Yeah,
right.
that is
So
much. Okay.
your board member would be helpful.
Right.
Good morning. I appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you.
And for our newer board members, those pages are up to date now for the master plan on the website. So if you want to read up on it ahead of the board meeting or ahead of the work session, then you may have questions that come out of that.
And then one thing I also want to note real quick on the slide that talked about the 5010s and also the leasing. Those are areas that are prime areas for technology improvements, especially the leasing side as well. So those we're discussing internally, just to let you know. So it'll be a better customer service option because we're so used to doing things online, being able to access accounts, make payments and all that stuff. So we're definitely looking at that just to make things easier for people to access information and to be able to conduct business with us.
Definitely. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay.
See any online? Any questions online? Okay.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that. I love the pictures of the ice at the various airports. And I know you guys typically just let it melt, right?
Well, we don't have the ability to de-ice the airfield. We don't have the permits or the resources to do that. And fortunately, in the valley, it is very short-lived. But we're fortunate that it didn't stick around too long. There was that one ice event back in 21 in February. It was over Valentine's Day, where the airport was closed for about a week.
That's how.
Yeah, and without power, exactly. Right. So we were very fortunate this was a short-lived event.
All right, very good. Do we want to do the finance manager update and then lunch, or what is everyone's wish?
Yeah, still, actually, lunch just got here. We could, carry on. Yeah, it's up to everybody in the room and online.
For me, I'm good for one more report.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
what I would do.
You're sitting here up for.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can do that.
So yeah, let's go ahead and do the finance report and then we'll take lunch after that.
Okay, and I just have a brief presentation for you today. So there's no voting or anything. I just wanted to give you an update on the 25-27 budget development and then just a brief finance snapshot of how we're doing so far in this biennium. And so I'm just going to focus on the revenues for this one. So this is a look at the budget cycle. And so as you can see, we're at the very beginning right now. So we just started our budget development for 25-27. And so as you see, that will be the budget that will start July 1st of 2025 and go for 2 years through July 30th or June 30th, I'm sorry, of 27. So right now we are just doing early budget prep. So we're doing internal discussions. I'm starting with historical data and looking at all of our ending balances, make sure everything looks good there. And then we have discussions about legislative concepts, policy option packages. They're very brief and they're not finalized at this point. So I'm just kind of vetting those. And then developing some of our legislative concepts are CSL, which is our current service level budget. So that's just your base budget before anything is added to it. And so in the next meeting, you'll hear more about some of the legislative concepts and the policy option packages. So that's anything that we want to add to the budget is we do it there. Next, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of our revenues. So I'm going to show you our revenues to date for the first 6 months of the biennium. So it started in July, and so I'm going to show you through December. That's the data I have right now, and we're going to look at other funds revenue. So for operations, PMP, and aircraft registration. And I thought it would be a good review for the board, especially as we're doing that budget development talk, because one of the main things when you're developing your budget is you're looking at how can you increase some of those revenues. So I thought it would be good to have historical data for you of some of our revenues. So as we've discussed before, jet fuel is our main revenue source. So we receive 3 cents right now, and 2 of those cents go to the ASAP program. So that was established in 2015. Oops, sorry about that. And 1 cent is split between operations and the PMP program. And so I know Kenji mentioned that earlier, that's been the same since 2000. So there's been no significant changes to the revenue there for operations or PMP for almost 25 years. And operations gets a little more than 0.5%, and PMP gets a little less than 0.5%. And so for the total budget, jet fuel makes up approximately 50% of our total budget, and that includes federal funds as well. And so if you just looked at other funds, it's more than 80% of our budget, of our revenue. And then this is a snapshot of the first 6 months of the biennium. It's taking a look at our jet fuel revenue, and it's the actuals versus what we budgeted for. So when we're putting together our budget, we're looking 2 years in advance of the forecast. And so we have to watch that really closely to make sure that they're aligned with what the actuals are. If not, then we might have to change some of our expenditures, reduce those. So the orange line shows the forecast that we put in for the budget, and the blue line is the actual. So you can see it's pretty close. It's actually about 7% more for those first 6 months than we forecasted in the budget. So that's good. It's something we do need to look at, but 7% increase is good.
How are we year over year? Like if we were to compare this to, say, pre-COVID and now, are we on target?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're not quite at what we were pre-COVID. So we're pretty close though, and watch that closely. But that was the forecast did take that into account. And so this kind of shows you our operations revenue. So on the left is the last biennium's revenue. In the middle here is the biennium to date through December, so for the first 6 months, and then what we have projected. So, you know, as I already mentioned, jet fuel is the main source of revenue for operations. And then the other main sources of revenue, the next one would be rents and royalties, which is a little over 700,000 per biennium. So that's, you know, all of our leases and our hangar fees. And then after that is some of our non-business licensing fees. So there's a lot of fees that are put into that category, including fuel flowage, tie down fees. There's a lot of small fees that go into there. But as you can see, our revenue is trending pretty close to what it was last biennium. So for operations. PMP is pretty straightforward because it just receives the jet fuel tax. So it receives about $2 million every biennium, so about $1 million a year. And that one is looking at a little bit more than it was last biennium. That one's pretty straightforward. And then aircraft registration is another main source of our other funds. And so as you can see, we receive a little over, we're forecasted to get a little over 761,000 for the biennium. And so those fees go to match for our capital projects. And then also we can use some of that for airport maintenance. So that's a really important revenue source for us. And yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I hate to ask this question, but on the registrations,
Mhm.
what do the registration funds, how are they applied with the uncrewed aircraft that that are required to register through the state? Like, are those registration fees going to airports, or is there something else that they're being
No,
dedicated
those
to?
go into the same bucket. Yeah, so it goes to the same bucket. So it's used for grant matches and it's used for airport maintenance. Yeah. Yeah. And this, the fees for this haven't been increased since about 2015. So that's something to look at too. And those were all of our other fund sources of revenue. So that's kind of what I wanted to go over today. I didn't put in a slide for the ASAP, but of course the ASAP gets two of those cents from fuel tax as well. Did you have any questions about the budget or any of our revenues?
Just back to the slide that is the development of the budget process.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, just for my own and maybe for our perspective, that April through July of this year, are you engaging with your policy director in the governor's office to develop those POPs and how, just structurally how that conversation occurs?
Yeah,
Good
so
question.
we're having conversations with the governor's office currently,
Okay,
and then as well as our DAS CFO as well. So there's internal processes going on, and then we definitely will be talking to board members as well. So just to keep everybody in the loop and just get a general gauge. So
okay. If there are obviously, legislative asks or that we're thinking of, and as we've certainly talked about, whether it's about electrification, whether it's about the move to unleaded fuels, whether it's about other things, I think it's important that we express those because obviously if you're finalizing your budget request in July and then taking it through a whole nother year's process, we need to socialize those with the current legislative session where we're not asking for anything and be prepared to make the heavy lift for the 25 session. And so I think there are real things that, from a advancing perspective that both our communities and ourselves would love to see. We'd love to certainly talk about things like electrification. I know we're partnering on a grant, but I'd love to also talk about, the state's role and participation in the transition to unleaded fuels and those, and certainly like to get that in front of the governor's policy advisors so that we can line up towards a 25 session, whatever that ask might be.
yeah, and I agree with 100%, getting more alignment, and then also having those communications early and often. And I think right about now is a good time to really start those conversations. And especially if there's something that don't appear on our LCs, if there's things that the court is looking at, or just having knowledge of that, so we can, when the time comes, just talk to it and just talk about it as well. Because I'd certainly be, I really want those conversations to happen early, just because of getting people on board and having that educational process underway way before things get to a point where the cake's not baked, right? So I get that, and yeah, that's part of the plan. So rest assured, we'll be speaking with you.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
I have a question, not necessarily budget, but since you have it on there, we've talked about KPMs in the past. And I see there's changes due in April.
Yeah.
There has been KPMs that we've discussed that may no longer be relevant for the agency to track. Is staff going to be coming to us to present changes in April or before that date?
Yes, I'll be doing it. Yeah, and so there was one KPM that I believe that we did specifically want to change.
The
It was
21.
the,
Obstructions.
exactly, yeah, so I will be coming to you for the board to approve of that, and then we'll submit it.
Okay.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. That was a great presentation. So this brings us up to lunch, and I think we're gonna allot a half an hour for that. And so if we can all be back at 3:50. Does that make sense?
Any-
350.
Oh, well,
Chair,
I'm
do you
East,
wanna-
I'm East Coast time. Sorry, I'm looking at my phone.
Chair, since we're ahead of schedule, you want to do like 40 minutes? That puts us right back at 1 o'clock our
Sure.
time because it gives us, we still have a little bit of time. I'm trying to get us in. I
Yeah.
recognize these schedules. We also have some pressures associated with construction work that's going on, but I also don't want to make everybody wait till 3 o'clock. So if
Sure.
we take a full year, it would be a little bit, help the overall schedule as well.
Yeah, that works. So coming back at 1 o'clock then?
That would be 1 o'clock our time, 4 o'clock for you.
Yes. Okay, great. Then we will reconvene at 1 o'clock. Enjoy your lunch.
Yeah.
What's in here? Are we gonna, you're gonna leave our stuff?
We will, no, we will leave from here logistics wise. And so we'll also, have some PPE provided to everybody who's going on the tour. Because you'll be going into an active construction site. So, yeah, we'll figure out that.
Can we leave our stuff here?
Yeah, we'll be able to leave all your stuff.
a better understanding of where registration dollars go to.
Oh,
That,
yeah.
Yeah, that's an issue.
Is it okay or is?
We'll double check with our security.
Probably a student.
It does, but don't know if that qualifies with, no, TSA will.
Yeah, because right now it
accept
just
that.
goes.
Can I claim her as a ward of the state?
Yeah.
Did you not take them?
Hi, Chair Stevens, we are back.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Hope you guys had an enjoyable lunch. This is the time for board updates. So if any board members have anything to share, news, events, related information, just go ahead and use your raise your hand feature if you're online or in the room. Let Holly know.
I'll just raise my hand. Thanks, Chair Stevens. We are, if you followed our commission meetings and our public meetings, there is a lot of concern and a lot of inquiry about, especially from our general aviation airports, about the transition to unleaded fuels and the real desire for the port to lean in along with the aviation industry. We have certainly been engaged with, developers of new fuels, whether it be Swift or GAMI. They are obviously ramping up their production. Unleaded fuels are the future, and they are coming. But we will be hosting throughout this year a series of workshops with the community about the transition and about the status of it with the FAA, the status of the industry, about how community members and how airports can get involved to kind of assist in that transition. So if there's any desire for board members or from the public in general, we will be sending out some materials about the first meeting, which I believe will be towards the end of this month. We're in February now, towards the end of this month or early March. And we'll have a series of those throughout this year to kind of bring the community up to speed on that issue of the transition to hopefully a much wanted and much needed product with less impact.
Yeah, Steve, I'm glad you brought that up. I actually had noted that as potentially a future work session item, just to bring board members up to speed. And what I'm hearing out in the industry is, yes, we're making this transition to unleaded fuel, but there's not a lot of movement in the private sector to bring that infrastructure to airports. And so it may take some more action on the part of airports to be able to get the ball rolling on that.
Exactly. That's exactly where we're looking at what can our role be, both from a convener maybe even from an economic perspective of how to incentivize and help this transition as private suppliers start providing this material. How do we get it to the market? How do we help our private businesses, our FBOs who are interested in going in that? We can hopefully be a convener for some of that.
Very good. Thanks. So you're always port's always a good big brother to all of us little guys in the state. We appreciate that. Any other board members with updates, news?
We're about to start the aviation portion of our STEAM education and workforce development program that we were funded through the U.S. Department of Education. So starting this month, we've got 17 high school students that are not only going to be learning about how to fly uncrewed aircraft and obtain their FAA Part 107 license, but we've worked out a partnership with Portland Community College, and these students will get 4 college credits in GO 248. So there's a bunch of tie-ins to the GIS world. They're going to be learning how to do photogrammetry, specifically 2-dimensional maps, 3D meshes, So it'll be a lot of fun. But we're really excited about getting into this portion. We just finished the first half, which was geared towards fire science, and all of them are walking away with 3 college credits. So they'll have a total of 7 at the end of the year, which is very exciting.
Do you have any, we certainly have a program through the school district, and I know they have 2 tracks right now, but I highly, I believe they'd be highly interested in having a 3rd track, because they certainly have a pilot, somebody who's interested in a pilot program, or students who are interested in pilot programs, students who are interested in maintenance programs. But then also there might be a 3rd track that they might be interested in, students interested in uncrewed aviation.
Yeah,
I'm happy to make that connection too.
absolutely. We're hoping that we can use our program as a model for others in the state. And I forgot to mention, we did do this through the high school. So it's a high
Yeah.
school Portland Community College partnership.
And they're partnered with PCC as well.
So that's really interesting. One thing I always forget to talk about here is on the other side of the state, it's TVCC. So when we talk about colleges within the state, Treasure Valley Community College in Idaho serves kind of what PCC does here in the metro area on the other side for some of the small rural airports. So or schools, not airports, I'm just saying airports. Anything we can glean from that to help the TVCC, because I know they have growing programs as well.
That's awesome.
Congratulations on yours. That's great.
Yeah, and what's really nice about Jeff too is he's an airline figure as well. So, and I think pulling in like PVCC, even though that's out of our state, I think the ways we start to think is more regionally. It makes a lot of sense, and especially pulling in the community colleges. I think it's going to be absolutely critical. I mean,
We don't need to move borders. We can just reach across.
Yeah, exactly. Talking with our Washington counterparts, talking with our Idaho counterparts, Utah, Nevada, California, why not? I think we've been too much focused on just one state rather than thinking about the larger picture, which we need to do.
And then the only other update is, I don't know if I can say it's official yet, but last month was introduced to the folks at NASA out of, what's the big NASA site down in California? Ames Research Center. Our agency is going to be partnering with the Acero project, which is run by NASA. And it's all about aviation modernization, focuses on wildland firefighting and aviation related wildland firefighting. But our the agency that I work for is going to be working with them. So next month, we're going to be down at Ames doing part of the intake and interview process.
Yeah, and that's Acero is the program that we're working with on the Oak Ridge project too. So it all ties in quite nicely.
End of report.
Thank you, Jeff.
I don't really have anything to looking around. I'm good.
Well, I'll jump in here because, we were talking about resiliency earlier, and so this ice storm that we experienced was the worst that we've ever had, and I'm guessing Steve would agree, and I know Redmond agrees. And so we, got down to a point where we needed to make decisions about continuing to burn through fuel and de-icer or wait, because if this is going to be our new normal, we've already determined we're going to have to really hold a lot more fuel and a lot more chemical to be able to battle ice. Snow we can handle. Ice is a different story. So, and we've actually also talked about potentially working with some of the de-icer companies to see if they can help develop something new. Because our challenge with this latest storm was we went from 100% rain to just flip the switch and went straight to freezing rain. That meant we didn't have any opportunity to put down any pre-treat chemical, and then once the ice started forming, because it was freezing rain, it flowed and then froze. So in some places on the airfield, we had 3 and 4 inches of ice, just solid ice, it's just, the guys gave their best try at it, but the usual techniques were just not working. So I think, it seems like we're experiencing more ice storms now than snowstorms, and they're lengthier in time. And so we're probably going to be looking to see if we can help develop some new techniques and potential other, chemical sources that could potentially work as well. Steve, I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to that.
Yeah,
Drones with flamethrowers.
certainly, I think that's a great idea, Catherine, to kind of see if there's regional